Kabir, the weaver of God's name. Of all the saints, Kabir and Mira are perhaps the only ones to have escaped the confines of sectarianism. Their compositions are sung with devotion all over India by followers of different faiths, and their hymns are included in the spiritual writings of more than one religious sect. Loved by all, they can be claimed by none. Kabir. Mystics of the East series, the weaver of God's name. It gives us great pleasure to present Kabir, the weaver of God's name, in our series on the life and teachings of the mystics of the East. Kabir, the 15th century saint of Banaras, was a low-caste weaver with no formal education. His humble origin did not prevent him, however, from becoming renowned in his own lifetime as a great saint, and his compositions were recited as they are now all over the country. Of all the mystics of India, Kabir is perhaps the most well-known worldwide, and popularity and spiritual depth of his writings have encouraged us to publish a more extensive translation of his poems and couplets than has been available till now. The primary aim of the translation has been to bring out the spiritual meaning, that is the essence of Kabir's composition. They are therefore not a rigidly literal rendering of the original. Now are they poetic for the sake of the being poetic. The complex imagery that abounds in Kabir's terse poetry has been deciphered and pieced together, and lives and explained, and its esoteric meaning has been conveyed in language that is vigorous and vivid. In Life of Kabir, no attempt has been made to discuss the scholarly theories of controversies connected with Kabir's life story, as this is not the object of the present monograph. The author has, however, tried to utilize some of the incidents that are mentioned by medieval poets and saints in order to highlight the personality and the spiritual character of the great saint, which are also reflected in Kabir's writing. Teachings of Kabir is a complete comparative study revealing the unity of the message that all the saints brings, whether they are from the religious tradition or another. From recent times or ancient parallel expressions from the writings in various saints illustrate that the path of the saints is propounded by mystics of East and West in a living path that has been taught by all the saints at all times. We are deeply beholden to Virendra Kumar Sethi for carrying out this work of Kabir after his exhaustive research on Mira. We are also grateful to the various people who have helped in the production of the book. Life. Adored by devotees, dreaded by the orthodox, and eulogized by his successors, Kabir is one of the most popular and well-known saints of medieval India. But despite his popularity, contemporary poets and historians have shown an inexplicable unconcern about the chronology of his life. The story of Kabir, coming through an oral tradition, has grown into a legend with the passage of time, through a legend with his own poetical beauty. These accounts are sometimes inspiring with their instinctive sensitivity in portraying the personality of this remarkable saint, thus sometimes mystifying with the exalted anecdote overdrawn with miracles. In the absence of contemporary records, Kabir's modern biographers have found his life history a riddle that continues to elude a solution. When and where Kabir was born, who his parents were, what his caste was, who his guru was, whether he was married or single, whether he had offspring or was issueless, where and when he died are some of the questions that still puzzle his biographers, and his deductions and conclusions are as shallow as they approach to the study of Kabir. While examining the available sources, one finds that Kabir's early admirers have been eloquent in their praise of the saint, but reticent about details of his life. The earliest account of Kabir comes from the Nabadas, a devotee who wrote about saints and holy men in a poetic work called Bhaktamal, a garland of devotees, completed in 1585 AD. Although silent about dates, percentage, parentage, caste, and other particulars, he gives an excellent impartial estimate of the Kabir's character and approach, which is amply sustained by even a casual perusal of his works. There's only one stanza on Kabir in the entire volume of Bhaktamal, but it throws light on the impact of Kabir's personality on the succeeding generation. Never did Kabir accept the distinctions of caste or the 4 stages of life, nor did he revere the 6 philosophies, religions devoid of love and hearsay, he declared. Yoga and penance, fasting and almsgiving are without meditation, empty, he affirmed Ramini, Sabati and Shaki. He employed to impart his message to Hindus and Turks alike, without preference, without prejudice. He said only what was beneficial to all. Subduing the world, he uttered not words to please or flatter others. Such was Kabir, who refused to accept the bias of the caste system or the supremacy of the 6 philosophies. But within the next 3 centuries, poet and Kabir's sectarian followers, known as Kabir Panths, created a halo around him that gradually acquired variegated hues, obliterating his original luster. The Kabir Panthis, in the absence of an abbot, a spiritual guide, became more Vaishnavite in outlook and tried to bring their preceptor into the Brahmanic fold. By the advent of the 18th century, new themes had been added to the life of Kabir, including the Immaculate Conception and the miraculous birth. This, according to some, Kabir was the son of the Brahmin woman whom Ramanand, the famous sage of the Benares, not realizing that she was a widow, had blessed with the verse, "May you have a son." The sage's words being irrevocable, she had an immaculate conception and gave birth to a child whom, out of fear of disgrace, she abandoned on the banks of the Lahar Tala Tank and Banaras. The account was further amplified by Kabir Bhakti poets, who claimed that this child was born not as an ordinary human being, but out of the large blister of his mother's palm. The sectarian leaders soon superimposed a new variation on the miracle of his birth. Kabir descended from the heavens in the form of the column of brilliant light on the lotus leaves in the Lahar tank and took the shape of a child. It is almost impossible to determine the time when these legends came into circulation. Anantas in his Parichay, Periyadas in his commentary on Bhaktamal, and Mukund and Kavi in his Life of Kabir, 1651, do not mention anything about Kabir's birth and parentage. They describe him as Jalluha or Muslim weaver who lived in Kashi. A few Muslim scholars have mentioned the story of an immaculate conception without any comment, while some modern authors have concluded that Kabir was the illegitimate son of a Brahmin widow. Recent scholars reject both the theories as a clumsy effort to bring Kabir into the Hindu fold and affirm that Kabir was the natural son of the Muslim weaver couple. Saint Ravidas, a contemporary of Kabir, says, "He whose ancestors slaughtered cows on Eid and Bakar Eid and revered sheikhs, martyrs and divines, and such too were the deeds of his father. He, Kabir the son, attained such heights that he is reversed in all the 3 worlds." Guru Amadas calls Kabir a Jalluha. A Rajat says, "From the womb of the Muslim weaver mother was born Kabir, the great son." The poet attributed to Dharamdas, one of the Kabir's main disciples, his mother a Turk, father a Muslim weaver, the son became a great devotee. There seems to be 2 different motives behind the accounts of the miraculous birth of Kabir. One is connected with a Brahmic or Hindu origin, a natural tendency on the part of the orthodox section of society's succeeding generations, when they found it difficult to deny the greatness of a saint born in a low caste. Similar attempts have been made to claim Saint Dadu, a Muslim cadre, as a Brahmin, and Saint Ravidas, a cobbler, as a Brahmin in a previous life. The second motive comes from the desire to project the saint as an extraordinary person, not necessarily by virtue of his spiritual attainment, but by miraculous tales of his incarnation into the world. Those who advance the theory of the divine light taking the form of the child Kabir appear to be prompted by the idea that the great saint like Kabir cannot become to the world through flesh and blood like ordinary mortals. Most scholars agree that the Kabir Panthis, that Nehru, a poor weaver, and his wife Nima found an infant Kabir on the leaves of the lotus plant in Lahar tank. in Banaras. Those who reject the theory of an immaculate conception say that he was born of Nehru and Nima. It is nevertheless interesting to note that early writings on Kabir do not give the names of his parents, although the early mention was that he was the son of a Muslim people. The names of his parents seem to have emerged from the century after Kabir's death, or perhaps even later. The object of this note on Kabir is not to enter into the various controversies associated with his life history, but to present the profile of the life, personality, and teachings of this eminent saint of the 15th century. The birth, caste, and the social status of the saint have little bearing on his greatness. Saints have neither a caste nor a nationality. They do not recognize such man-made distinctions. Kabir himself used to declare, "I am neither a Hindu nor a Muslim." Kabir was born in 1398 AD, the son of the Muslim weaver Nehru and his wife Nima, who lived in the outskirts of the holy city of Banaras. He was given the name Kabir, an Arabic word meaning the Most High and used as an epithet for God. D.H. Westcott points out that there is no taboo in giving it as a name to a human being, but one wonders how such a name, neither common nor known to the poor and illiterate Muslims of those days, was given to a son of the weaver who had no pretensions in the Arabic language. According to the religious custom, Nehru went to the Qazi, the Muslim priest, to receive divine injunction from the Quran and find a name for his son. The Qazi opened the holy book and found the name Kabir. Reluctant to confer such a lofty name on a petty weaver's child, the Qazi tried to find another name, but again the book opened to an epithet for God. He wanted to try a third name, but Nehru, happy with what was indicated by the Quran, started calling his son Kabir. Kabir showed signs of a religious inclination from an early age. There was little scope for education among the poor and low-caste sections of the city. Muslim texts written in Arabic and Persian were beyond the comprehension of the masses. The Hindu scriptures, well guarded by the priestly hierarchy, could not be touched by the mullah, militia, and unscouthed alien. Though deprived of formal instruction on account of the poverty and low caste, Kabir had, as evident from his composition, a keen intellect, a discerning mind, and a capacity for understanding and analysis far beyond the ordinary. From an early age, Kabir started to assist his parents to small jobs connections with their profession. Gradually learning the techniques of his family trade, and became an weaver and proved an asset to his parents. At the same time, his interest in matters other than the mundane continued to grow, taking a shape of a spiritual hunger for truth. During his adolescence, the quest for spiritual knowledge at times kept Kabir away from the family work, and his long periods of introspection irritated his parents, yet he continued to be the cynosure of the family and the neighborhood because of his affectionate nature, mild manners, and kind disposition. Sensitive and compassionate from an early age, Kabir could not bear to see anyone suffering. It is said that once, while he was still a child, his father wanted to sacrifice an animal on the occasion of a religious festival. Kabir was so upset at the idea of causing torment to the beast that his father had to yield to his earnest remonstrations and tearful entreaties and release the animal. One winter morning, on his way to the market, Kabir met an old recluse, shivering in the cold, moved by his plight. Young Kabir, whom Nehru had lately given the duty of selling a finished cloth in the weekly market, offered the man a few yards from the cloth to market, protect him from the cold. When the poor old man begged for the entire piece of the cloth, the Kabir would not say no and gave it away. Returning home, he told that what had happened and patiently bore the scolding he received from his parents. It is generally accepted that Ramanand was Kabir's guru. Nabadas, Anantdas, Priyadas, Mukund Kavi, Mohsin Fani, Kabir Panthi literature, and most modern scholars confirm that Kabir was Ramanand's disciple, but Westcott, Ramaprasad, Tripathi, and a few others maintain that he was the disciple of the Sheikh Taki. They seem to base their view mainly on the Kajinatulli Sifya by Ghulam Sarwar, written in 1868, wherein Sheikh Taki is described as Kabir's guru. From Kabir's poem, it appears that he visited a number of the places and met many holy men, presumably in his search for the true path to God. From his own observation, he has realized the hollowness of the rituals and modes of worship of both the Hindus and Muslims. His quest was for the something higher and more real than what the make-believe worship prevalent in Banaras could offer. Kabir later taught a path based on the practice of the Shabd, which aimed at God realization while living a path not on outward pursuits but of going within, who initiated him into this path, a path as old as the creation and followed by early saints like Jadev, Namdev, Hasrat Namuddin, Khajwa, Monuddin, and others, was in some Sheikh Taki, Taki being a title that could not be applied to any realized soul, or was it some other saint whose name Kabir may have thought proper not to reveal? A formal initiation from Ramanand is, however, a traditionally accepted fact, conceded by almost all modern scholars and confirmed by most of the available records. Ramanand was not a Shabdmaji saint. He belonged to the saint Samapradya, a religious tradition that worshipped Lord Vishnu of the Hindu Trinity and his consort Lakshmi. Ramanand changed it to the worship of Ram and Sita and the incarnation of Vishnu and Lakshmi. He also preached reverence for all the Hindu deities. Dr. Bhuvenshwar Nath Mishra, in his treatise of the Vaishnava school of the practices. Although some of his followers were the worshippers of the formless Ram, it will be wrong to say that Ramanand was an advocate of the Nirgun school of devotion. It is clear that Ramanand was purely a devotee of the Vaishnava school and not the yoga mages who seek the deity within the body. It is therefore likely that Kabir was initiated into Shabd Marg, or the path of God realization through the word, by some saint whose identity is not established. But when he began to preach that he had learned, he found that the people resented him. The Muslims dubbed him an infidel. The Hindus asked him where he had learned his new theories and who his guru was. They sneered at him as a nigura, someone without a guru, held in disdain by the Hindus in general. From their ridicule and hostility, Kabir must have realized that in Banaras, an age-old citadel of formalism, idol worship and caste distinctions, he could neither be given a hearing nor be allowed to live in peace. He needed the protection of a person who had an unquestioned hold over the people of Banaras, whose disciple no one would dare to touch. Such a person was Ramanand, a religious leader held in great esteem, almost awed by the priestly caste, the theologians, and the people. But Kabir now knew that Ramanand would never accept him as a disciple. Even to approach him was not easy, but he never looked at the face of the untouchables and the heterodox aliens. Kabir had to use the stratagem to gain his object. He discovered that the great sage used to go to the banks of the Ganges every day in the early hours of the morning for a bath. Kabir lay down on the steps of the ghat leading to the river in the pre-dawn to light. Ramanand did not see Kabir, and his foot hit Kabir on his head. A startled Ramanand exclaimed, "Rama, Rama!" Kabir quietly got up and went away. He now declared that he was a disciple of Ramanand. Some orthodox Brahmins and disciples of Ramanand, much perturbed, asked the sage, "Sir, was there a dearth of high-caste Hindus in the city that you chose to admit a Muslim weaver to the fold of your disciples?" When Ramanand refuted the allegation, Kabir was brought before him. Ramanand, to avoid looking in the face of the low caste, spoke to Kabir from behind a curtain and asked why Kabir was making a false claim. Kabir respectfully replied, "Sir, I was initiated by you on the steps of the ghat. You touched my forehead with your foot and gave me the mantra Rama Rama." Ramanand, a noble and truthful soul, could not deny it and accepted Kabir as his disciple. The relationship between Kabir and Ramanand had its own contradictions. Kabir was opposed to all the external rites and rituals, most of which Ramanand revered. Though an upholder of the traditions of the Hindu metaphysics and rigid formalism, Ramanand was also liberal enough to let his disciple follow his own method of worship. Thus, the intellectual Catholicity of Ramanand allowed the recusant dynamism of Kabir to thrive under his protection. Though he always respected his guru, Kabir never subscribed to Ramanand's traditional beliefs. It is said that Kabir's association gradually affected a change in his guru's outlook. Every day Ramanand used to perform mansi or mental worship of his deity Ram. He would form the mental picture of the idol and bath it decorated with fineries and offer delicacies to it. One day he was sitting inside his house engaged in worship while Kabir was waiting outside the entrance to convey his respects to the Guru through the curtain. Ramanand made a slip in his worship. He forgot to put the garland of flowers around the deity's neck before placing a crown on his head. He was perplexed because the circumference of the garland in his mental picture was not large enough to go round the crown, and it was an act of disrespect to remove the headpiece. Kabir called to him from outside, Gurudev, untie the knot of the garland and then tie it around the idol's neck. Ramanand was startled. How could Kabir know of his predicament? Apparently, this low-caste disciple was no ordinary person. The venerable sage called out to one of his disciples, remove the curtain, for what can one hide from Kabir? Ushered into his presence, Kabir respectfully bowed to his master, but Ramanand stood up and embraced him. The barrier between the master and his disciple was thus removed, and Ramanand became more receptive to Kabir's teachings. Kabir began to give hints of the inner past to his guru. At times he would shake his master with strong remarks. It is said that once on the death of the anniversary of Ramanand's ancestors, preparation were being made to make an offering of the rice to the departed souls. Kabir said to his guru, Sir, this lolly Kabir is perplexed. The crows eat up the rice. How can it reach your ancestors? Ramanand gradually began to perceive the truth of what this young disciple would say. Ahmad Shah, in his impartial introduction of the Bijak, remarks, this is every reason to suppose that Ramanand was largely influenced by Kabir. The introduction of the low-caste devotees like Raidas, Dana, Satna and others in the fold of the Ramanand's disciple was perhaps a discrete outcome of the association with Kabir. The Sanskrit treatises of Ramanand do not give the slightest hint of the change in him. The Ravatars or the followers of Ramanand continued with formalism in dress, tilak and markings on the forehead, rosary and rituals. However, a poem by Ramanand included in the Adi Granth confirms the oral tradition that Ramanand was initiated into the practice of Shabd by Kabir, describing it as a brilliant poem. R.D. Ranji says that this song of Ramanand has more Kabirism in it than Tulsism. Ramanand's tactic acquaintances to Kabir in allowing him to practice and preach a spiritual path that diametrically opposed to his own implies that Ramanand had a feeling of respect for the Kabir thought, and its natural culmination was the acceptance of the path of Kabir. Though perhaps his late in this life, in this context, it could be kept in mind that if the Adi Granth, a unique collection of the spiritual and devotional compositions which corroborate with that the teachings of all saints are identical, shabds or hymns of only those saints and devotees are included who had faith in the formless and God and who believe in the path of the Nama of Shabd Vaheguru. A formal initiation from Ramanand is, however, a traditionally accepted fact, considered by almost all modern scholars and confirmed by most of the available records. Ramanand was not a Shabd Margi saint. He followed to the Sri Sampradaya, a religious tradition that worshipped Lord Vishnu of the Hindu Trinity and his consort Lakshmi. Ramanand changed it to the worship of Ram and Sita, the incarnation of Vishnu and Lakshmi. He also preached reverence for all other Hindu deities. Dr. Bhuvenshwar Nath Mishra, in his treatise of the Vaishnava school of practice, says, although some of his followers were of the worshippers of the formless Ram, it would be wrong to say that Ramanand was an advocate of Nirguna school of devotion. It is clearly that Ramanand was purely a devotee of Vaishnava school and not the yoga marches who seek the deity within the body. It is therefore likely that Kabir was initiated into the Shabd mark or the path of the God realization through a word by some saint whose identity is not established. But when he began to preach what he had learned, he found that the people resented him. The Muslim dubbed him as an infidel. The Hindus asked him where he had learned his new theories and who his guru was. They sneered at him in a guru, someone without the guru, held in disdain by the Hindus in general. From their ridicule and hostility, Kabir must have realized that in Banaras, an age-old citadel of formalism, idol worship and caste distinctions, he would neither be given an hearing nor be allowed to live in peace. He needed the protection of a person who had unquestioned hold over the people of Banaras and whose disciple no one could dare to touch. Such a person was Ramanan. Wow. Ramanan's tactic acquaintance to Kabir is allowing him to practice and preach a spiritual path diametrically opposite to his own implies that Ramanan had a feeling of respect for what Kabir taught, and his natural culmination was the acceptance of the path of Kabir, though perhaps very late in his life. In this extent, it should be kept in mind that in the Adi Granth, the unique collection of the spiritual and devotional compositions which corroborate with the teachings of all saints are identical shabds or hymns of only those saints and devotees are included who had faith in one formless God and who believed in the path of the Naam or Shabd. The inclusion of Ramanan's hymn is significant, for it confirms that he had at some time in his life accepted the path of the saints. There is no contemporary evidence available to indicate whether Kabir was married or single. Periyadas is perhaps the first to say that Kabir was married. Dr. Tilok Narayan Dikshit, in his analysis of the Parichaya of Anandas in 1595, says that some lines of Anandas clearly suggest that Kabir had a family of his own. Oral traditions, his name of the wife was as Loi. Mukund Kabir, in his biography of the Kabir, gives the name of Rupa. Raghudas, in his Bhaktamal, mentions that Kabir had a son named Kamal. Most scholars, in the view of the strong oral tradition and evidence of the 16th, 17th century poets, concur that the view that Kabir was married and had a son Kamal and a daughter Kamali. Kabir Pant is taking it as a slight to his noble personality, vehemently denied that Kabir was a householder. Their writings do not date earlier than the 18th and 19th century and reflect a view that saints do not debase themselves in the level of ordinary men by leading a family life. In support of their contention, they cite Kabir's poems extolling the virtues of continence. However, in one of his own couplets, Kabir says that he too was married, but when he realized that indulgence in sex was a hindrance in spiritual progress, he kept aloof from his wife. Kabir, like all saints, recommended a family life rather than forced celibacy and renunciation. He preached contentment, not rigid austerity, desirelessness, not compulsive abnegation. The continence of Kabir is a result not of separation, but of the sublimation that is a natural sequel to the bliss of the inner spiritual experience. A few poems of Kabir included in the Adi Granth depict his wife's vexation over his hospitality to holy men. Always kind and generous, Kabir would suffer himself and the family to sleep on the floor in order to provide cause for his guests. He would offer them bread and gladly go without his meals, and let his wife and children allay their hunger with a handful of roasted gram. He regularly worked on his loom and sold the cloth in the weekly market. Living on his own honest earnings was a practice he followed till the end of his life. A light portable loom was a part of his package whenever he went on his travels. Happy with this, what he earned, living from day to day, he never desired for more. If one of these songs he prays to the Lord, not for wealth and luxuries, not for the comforts of life, not even for the provision or a rainy day. He begs simply for daily bread for himself and his family. His income was meager and poverty was the accepted way of his life, contentment being his most cherished treasure. Once during the rainy season, a few holy men unexpectedly arrived at Kabir's hut. Due to the rains, Kabir had not been able to sell the cloth in the market, and there was not enough food in the house for the guests. He asked his wife Loi if some grocer would be persuaded to give a little flour and lentils on the credit, and which would be paid for the next market day. But what grocer would agree to give things on credit to a poor, low-caste weaver with an uncertain income? Louis went to the several grocers, but they all insisted on cash payment. One grocer, however, agreed to give provisions on the credit on the condition that she spend the night with him. Shocked, she smiled at his ridiculous demand, which the grocer took as the consent and obliged her with the required groceries. That evening, when the guests had left, Louis informed Kabir about a conversation with the grocer. Kabir, deciding to use this as an opportunity to enlighten the grocer and make him aware of his folly, ordered Louis to get ready to go to the grocer's house. It was a rainy day and still drizzling. Kabir told Louis to cover herself with a blanket as protection from the rain. Then he lifted her onto his shoulders and carried her through the streets. The grocer was surprised to know that neither was Louis' dress wet nor from the rain, nor were her feet muddy from the streets. He asked her how she had managed to keep her feet clean, and she replied, "My husband covered me with a blanket and carried me on his shoulder to your house." The young grocer was astounded. Though the purity on the Louis' face and marked with a touch of sadness moved him deeply, he still looked at her in disbelief. But when she added that Kabir was waiting outside to take her back, the grocer realized the state of his own degradation and the greatness of Kabir. Falling on his knees, he begged her to forgive him and to take him to Kabir immediately. Kabir forgave the repentant grocer, who, coming into his closer association with the saint, later became his disciple. Saints have their own way to draw souls into their fold. Kabir had a lofty ideal for righteousness. As far as he and his family were concerned, he would never compromise with his principles. His approach to daily life was marked by an simplicity, sincerity, and truthfulness, and his face would at times leave the worldly perplexed. In the early days of his youth, once he went to the market to sell cloth. The price was asked was 5 takas, but his customers would offer him only 3, which he did not accept. It was almost evening. A broker, noticing Kabir's problem, offered to help him. Realizing that it was a well-woven piece of cloth, the broker, fully conversant with human psychology, started shouting, "Excellent cloth, going very cheap, only 12 takas." Within a few minutes, customers were flocking around him, and the broker struck the bargain at 11 takas. Keeping 2 takas as his commission, he placed the balance of 9 in Kabir's hands, but the young weaver refused to accept more than 5 takas, the price he had originally asked and which he thought reasonable. It was a novel experience for Kabir. He commented, "If I tell the truth, I am accused of falsehood. But lies the world disbelieves. A cloth worth 5 takas 5 have through falsehood fetches 11 as the price." Wow. If I tell the truth, I am accused of falsehood, but lies the world believes. A cloth worth 5 takas through falsehood fetches 11 as the price. Vaheguru. So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Kabir, the weaver of God's name. Of all the saints, Kabir and Meera are perhaps the only ones to have escaped the confines of sectarianism. Their compositions are sung with devotion all over India by followers of different faiths, and their hymns are included in the spiritual writings of more than one religious sect. Loved by all, they can be claimed by none. Kabir. Mystics of the East series, the Weaver of God's Name. It gives us great pleasure to present Kabir, the Weaver of God's Name, in our series on the life and teachings of the mystics of the East. Kabir, the 15th century saint of Benares, was a low-caste weaver with no formal education. His humble origin did not prevent him, however, from becoming renowned in his own lifetime as a great saint, and his compositions were recited as they are now all over the country. Of all the mystics of India, Kabir is perhaps the most well-known worldwide, and popularity and spiritual depth of his writings have encouraged us to publish a more extensive translation of his poems and couplets than has been available till now. The primary aim of the translation has been to bring out the spiritual meaning, that is the essence of Kabir's composition. They are therefore not a rigidly literal rendering of the original. Now are they poetic for the sake of being poetic. The complex imagery that abounds in Kabir's terse poetry has been deciphered and pieced together and lives and explained, and its esoteric meaning has been conveyed in language that is vigorous and vivid. In Life of Kabir, no attempt has been made to discuss the scholarly theories of controversies connected with Kabir's life story, as this is not the object of the present monograph. The author has, however, tried to utilize some of the incidents that are mentioned by medieval poets and saints in order to highlight the personality and the spiritual character of the great saint, which are also reflected in Kabir's writing. Teachings of Kabir is a complete comparative study revealing the unity of the message that all the saints brings, whether they are from the religious tradition or another. From recent times or ancient parallel expressions from the writings in various saints illustrate that the path of the saints is propounded by mystics of East and West in a living path that has been taught by all the saints at all times. We are deeply beholden to Virendra Kumar Sethi for carrying out this work of Kabir after his exhaustive research on Meera. We are also grateful to the various people who have helped in the production of the book. Life. Adored by devotees, dreaded by the orthodox, and eulogized by his successors, Kabir is one of the most popular and well-known saints of medieval India. But despite his popularity,